The night I found out what they were going to do to me, I was standing in my mother's kitchen, shelling peas into a metal bowl. The sound was steady, a rhythm I had known since I was 4 years old. Pop, tumble, pop, tumble. My hands kept moving even after my mother said the words, even after I understood what they meant. She did not look at me when she said them. She kept her eyes on her own bowl, her fingers working fast the way they always did, and she said, "The bishop has been told. The church will address it Sunday. You have until then to end it completely." I was 19 years old. I was in love for the first time in my life. And in my community, those two things together were enough to put everything I had ever known at risk. My name is Martha. I grew up Old Order Amish in a small district in northern Indiana. I left several years ago, and what I am about to tell you is something I never spoke out loud for a very long time. Not because it wasn't true, but because for years I did not have the words for what was done to me, and because the people who did it called it love. If you want to go deeper, the full Amish Insider Guide is in the description. Before I tell you what happened, I need to tell you about Daniel. Not because this story is really about him. It isn't. It's about the machine that activated the moment someone decided our love was wrong. But you need to understand what we were, so you understand what they decided to destroy. Daniel was not from my district. That was the first problem. He was from a neighboring Old Order community about 11 miles east, but his Ordnung, the unwritten code of rules that governs every aspect of Amish life, was slightly different from ours. Different enough. His district allowed slightly wider hat brims. His family's buggy had a different style of reflective triangle on the back. Small things. Invisible things to anyone outside. But inside, those differences are not small. Inside, they mark you. They say, "Not entirely ours." We met at a large community work frolic, a barn raising 2 districts over. I was carrying water and food with the other women. He was on the roof. I did not speak to him that day. I did not even learn his name. But I watched the way he worked, careful, unhurried, the way he checked on the younger boys beside him, making sure they were steady. Something about that made a quiet impression I could not name. 3 weeks later, at a Sunday singing, he was there again. This time he spoke to me. He asked my name. He said he had seen me at the frolic. I felt the heat come into my face before I could stop it. He started giving me buggy rides home. That is how it begins, in our world. That is the signal. Within a month, the whole district knew, and that is when the first thing happened. My father called me to sit with him after supper one evening. He folded his hands on the table. He said, "This boy is not from here. His family does not follow the same Ordnung as we do. It would be complicated. I want you to think carefully." I told him I would think carefully. I thought carefully, and I kept seeing Daniel. Here is what I did not understand then, that I understand completely now. My father's quiet conversation at the kitchen table was not just fatherly concern. It was the first move in a sequence, a system, a machinery that Amish communities have refined over generations for handling members who begin to stray from the expected path. What I experienced over the next 8 months was not a series of individual decisions made by people who cared about me. It was a coordinated, tiered process, and every single person who participated in it believed completely with their whole heart that they were doing it out of love. That is the part that took me the longest to make peace with. The second move came from the women. This is something outsiders almost never understand about Amish social control. It is not only top-down, it is horizontal. It moves through the women, through the kitchens and quilting bees and work frolics, as a current moves through water. You cannot see it directly. You can only feel it. My friend Rachel stopped walking beside me after church. Not dramatically, not with a fight or an explanation. She simply began choosing a different path from the building to the buggies. 3 other girls I had known since childhood developed a habit of finishing their sentences and then looking just past my shoulder when I was speaking, as if someone more important had appeared behind me. At a quilting bee in early March, I sat down at the frame, and the 2 women on either side of me shifted almost imperceptibly away. Just an inch, maybe 2. Enough that I felt the space where warmth had been. No one said anything about Daniel. No one said anything about me. That was the precision of it. It was not cruelty that could be named or argued with. It was temperature. The temperature of the room when I entered it had simply dropped several degrees, and everyone was pretending not to notice the cold. I told Daniel about it one evening in the buggy, the dark fields going past on both sides of us. He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "I am getting it too." His father had been visited by 2 of our district's deacons. A pastoral visit, they called it. Friendly, concerned. They had sat in the family's kitchen and drunk coffee and talked about the importance of community cohesion, the importance of young people building lives within their own district. They had not said, "Your son should stop seeing that girl." They had not needed to. If you want to go deeper, the full Amish Insider Guide is in the description. The third move was the bishop. I want to be precise about what a bishop means in an old order Amish community, because I think people outside imagine something like a stern authority figure issuing decrees. It is more complicated and, in some ways, more suffocating than that. The bishop is not distant. He is the man who baptized you, who sat with your father when your grandfather died, who blessed your home. He is woven into every moment of spiritual weight in your life. When he speaks to you, it does not feel like institutional authority. It feels like God leaning down and speaking quietly. Our bishop came to our home on a Tuesday afternoon. I was told to sit in the front room with my parents. He did not raise his voice. He spoke about Gelassenheit, about yielding, about the wisdom of the community over the desires of one person. He said that when we choose partners, we are not only choosing for ourselves, we are choosing for our families, for our district, for the future of everything our ancestors sacrificed to preserve. He looked at me with what I can only describe as genuine sadness. He said, "Martha, we do not want to lose you." That one sentence was the most effective thing said to me in 8 months of pressure, because it named the real threat without ever stating it directly. He did not say, "You will be shunned." He did not say, "You will lose your family and your community and everyone you have ever loved." He said, "We do not want to lose you." And what I heard was, "But we will." I went to my room that evening and sat on my bed for a long time. I could hear my parents downstairs, my mother washing dishes, my father's chair on the wooden floor, the sounds of my whole life, I just below me. And I tried to calculate. That is the only word for what I did. I sat and I tried to calculate the cost. I want to tell you about a girl named Susanna. She was from a district in Ohio, a cousin of a girl I knew, and her story had traveled the informal network of Amish women, like all important stories do, passed in low voices during work, never written down. Susanna had fallen in love with a man who had left the church, not yet baptized, so technically not subject to the ban, the shunning. But the relationship was enough. The community moved through all the same steps mine moved through with me. The temperature dropping, the deacons visiting, the bishop's quiet sadness. Susanna did not end the relationship. What happened next was not dramatic. There was no public scene, no shouting. She was simply no longer included. And work frolics she was not told about. Illnesses in families she was not informed of, so she could not come to help. The casseroles and the showing up that form the entire social and practical infrastructure of Amish life stopped flowing to her door. She became a person the community continued to see at church, continued to be technically civil to, but from whom the warmth had been permanently removed. She held on for 14 months, then she ended the relationship. The warmth did not fully return. Something had been noted about her. Some internal categorization had shifted. She married a man from her district 2 years later. She told her cousin, who told the girl I knew, who told me in a low voice while we were carrying buckets from a well, "I think about him every single day. I will think about him until I die." I have thought about Susanna many times since I left. After the bishop's visit, the fourth move began. This one I was not prepared for because it came from inside my own home. My mother started leaving her Bible open on the kitchen table in the mornings, open to specific passages. She did not point at them or refer to them, she simply left them there. Corinthians, Ephesians, verses about the body of the church and the danger of division. I would come downstairs and make my coffee, and the open Bible would be there, and my mother would be at the stove with her back to me, saying nothing. My younger sister, who was 16, and who I had shared a bed with for the first 13 years of my life, stopped asking me things, small things. The daily small things of sisterhood. What do you think of this fabric? Will you help me with my hair? Did you notice what so-and-so said today? The small things stopped, not with hostility, with a careful, practiced neutrality that told me she had been coached. My father stopped sitting with me at the end of the day. That was the one that broke something open in me. He had sat with me at the end of the day since I was very small. It was not a formal thing. He would come in from the barn and I would sometimes be in the kitchen or the sitting room and we would talk or sit in silence, and it was one of the most ordinary and beloved things in my life. It stopped. If you want to go deeper, the full Amish Insider Guide is in the description. I lasted 3 more weeks. Then I went to Daniel in the buggy one evening and I told him I could not do it anymore. I told him I was sorry. He did not argue with me or try to change my mind. He just nodded slowly, looking at the horse's back, and then he said something I will carry for the rest of my life. He said, "They didn't ask you to choose between me and them. They made it so you couldn't breathe until you chose." I went home that night and I sat in the kitchen and the warmth started coming back almost immediately. Within 2 weeks, my mother was herself again. My sister was beside me again. My father sat with me in the evenings. The quilting bee women shifted back. Rachel was next to me again after church, and I understood something I had not understood before. The warmth was real. The love was real. But it was also conditional in a way that had never been named out loud. In a way I don't think most of the people wielding it even consciously recognized. They believed they were rescuing me. They believed the coldness was painful medicine for my own sake. Not one of them, I think, understood themselves to be operating a system. They thought they were loving me. That is what made it so complete. I stayed another 2 years after Daniel. I was baptized. I followed the ordinance completely. I did everything right. And the entire time, some part of me was sitting very still and very quiet and taking precise note of what I had learned. I had learned that love in my community came with a mechanism attached to it, that the mechanism could be activated, and that once you had seen it activated, you could not unsee it. I left at 23. The shunning that followed was formal this time because I had been baptized. My mother's face on the day I left is not something I am going to describe because some things belong to me. My father did not come to the door. I found a therapist in the city eventually. She had worked with other people who had left high-control religious communities. She told me something that I keep returning to. She said the most effective systems of control are the ones that feel exactly like love. Because you can argue with a lock on a door. You cannot argue with the face of someone who genuinely believes they are saving you. I think about that often. I think about Susanna in Ohio, thinking about her person every day until she dies. I think about Daniel saying they made it so you couldn't breathe. I think about my mother's open Bible on the kitchen table and the precise surgical removal of small warmths. What they do to Amish girls who fall in love with the wrong person is not violence. It is not cruelty in any form the law could touch. It is the slow, patient, coordinated withdrawal of everything that makes a life feel livable. And it works. It works almost every time. Because you are not just losing a relationship. You are being shown, in language more powerful than words, that love from the people you need most is not unconditional. It was never unconditional. That was the thing I had to grieve. If you want to go deeper, the full Amish Insider Guide is in the description. If you grew up in a community where love came with conditions that were never spoken out loud, I see you. If you have sat at a kitchen table while someone looked just past your shoulder and understood exactly what that meant, I see you. If you have ever done the calculation, if you have ever tried to weigh a person you loved against everything else you were allowed to have, I see you. You were not weak for choosing what you chose. You were surviving inside a system designed to leave you no real choice at all. My name is Martha. And if you want to hear more truths from behind the prayer cap, subscribe to Hannah the Amish Girl. I have so many more stories that have never been said out loud. If you want to go deeper, the full Amish Insider Guide is in the description. Choose your freedoms wisely. They might just save your life.